Okay, welcome everyone to Aurora, Colorado for our March 15 and 16, 2023 Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting. Just want to say, maybe we're all thinking about this, but it was 3 years ago this week that pretty much everything shut down, and particularly in our state when ski areas and others, when we were approaching spring break, we were supposed to meet at this location a couple of times. And so third time is a charm. So it's really nice to be at this facility. I want to thank former Superintendent Rico Munn, is the one that had made these arrangements for us. He has since gone to a position at Colorado State University. And just thank everybody for being here. We've tried to do this, to move this to Aurora a few times. And hopefully this is the magic sauce. I want to thank Commissioner Adams for assisting with the guest list for tonight. We do have a nice turnout. I was at an event last night, and recognizing it is spring break and everything else, it was fairly lightly attended. So looking at the list, I'm delighted to see who's actually joining us tonight. So look forward to having that dinner. We have a big meeting today and tomorrow, and not a lot of fluff built in. So I just want to in advance thank the commission and the staff and everyone for what will be a marathon. So eat your Wheaties, get ready to sit a lot. We'll try to stretch and break when we can, and mostly just thank you for your service. So we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance, and I will ask Commissioner Adams to lead us. Thank you for that. And Laura, if you'll call the roll.
Adams. Bailey.
Here.
Blecka.
Present.
Haskett.
Here.
May.
Present.
Otero.
Present.
Phillips.
Here.
Reading.
Present.
Touchton. Vardy.
Present.
Chair Hauser.
Here. Thank you very much. Okay, the first thing we will do is approve the minutes from the January 17 and 18 hybrid Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting, and the January and February Wolf Plan meetings. May I request a motion? Commissioner Touchton.
I move to approve the minutes.
Okay, Commissioner Phillips, second. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign. Great, thank you for that. Any corrections to the agenda? I was not made aware of any, so I am going to assume that we are good to go on the agenda. Okay, we will proceed as the agenda is written, which is jam-packed. Just saying. So I don't know for the others of you that it feels like an eternity since we had actually, quote, a regular meeting. And this is the time when we say, has anything been going on since the last time we met? Since we've been together 5 times since January. I hope there has been other business and other things that you all have participated in. I assume that is true. So to the extent that you'd like to share your activities and what you've been doing and anything for the good of the public and the rest of the commission, I'd invite those comments and any questions now. I think that is Commissioner Reading? Okay, sorry.
Yeah, do we have the slides? I was going to let you guys know what I did in January when I missed these meetings. Do we have those? Show you a few slides to whet your appetite about an area very different than ours, but incredibly diverse given where it is and the abundance of wildlife and nature in the southern extremes of our world are simply spectacular and amazing. And
1 second.
okay.
Kirk.
There we go. So started off in the Falkland Islands and just an amazing place with a lot of wildlife and some sheep farms. So seeing sheep interspersed with penguins was kind of interesting. Next slide. And just huge abundances of things like these black-browed albatrosses and light-mantled sooty albatrosses on the left. Next slide. And then scooting over to South Georgia Island, which was just a spectacular landscape. And if you look at that valley going up, you see all those little dots. Every one of those is a penguin. So the abundance of penguins, next slide, you can see on the next slide of king penguins was just astounding. We had about 100,000 king penguins in this one colony. Just an incredible assemblage of animals. Next slide. And so then we went to the South Shetlands, which is just off Antarctica, and we saw things like Antarctic fur seals and chinstrap penguins. Next slide. And things in Antarctica like these leopard seals, which, to give you an idea of scale, that skull is bigger than a grizzly bear's skull. So an impressive beast, a top predator of the lands down there, and we got to see one eat a penguin, which was disturbing but exciting at the same time. Next slide. And just the incredible ice forms, and the landscape again down there was just truly astounding. So I think that's the last slide. Is there one more? But just to give you an idea, oh no, whales. We saw hundreds of whales, humpbacks feeding, bubble net feeding, which if you haven't been around them, when they bubble net feed, they swim in circles, blow bubbles, and then come up in the middle and consume the krill in vast numbers. When you're in a zodiac, which we were, surrounded by these feeding whales, it's a little bit humbling, to say the least. And then just penguins swimming all over the place. So we saw several species of penguins, tons of whales, an incredible experience, and I recommend it to anybody who likes animals and nature. So thanks.
Awesome. Thank you very much. Other comments? Commissioner Haskett.
Thank you, Madam Chair. It's been a long time since January, and I've been to a lot of events since then, but instead of telling you about those events, I would like to show a video of Northwest Colorado. I am proud of Area 6 staff and their dedication to what they're doing in our winter conditions. And if you'll queue up a video for me. I want to say one other thing. There was a winter conditions meeting right before our meeting in Rifle, and one of the county commissioners made a comment that you can tell how well CPW is doing by the temperature in the room, and that meant a lot. So, thank you. We're having video difficulties today. We're in a super
We've been having a heck of a winter. I'm standing on hard packed snow. We've got probably about 3 foot of standing hard packed snow out here. It's so hard that the elk are walking on top of it in a lot of spots. And so it's really hard for them to dig down to get to anything that's underneath. This morning in Maybell, it's about 0 degrees. That's about our average temperature here the last several days. Down to, minus 15 or 20 at night and up to about 15 or 20 during the day. And just pretty tough conditions. Today we're conducting a baiting operation for about 200 to 250 head of elk in the Maybell corridor along the Yampa River drainage. We're influencing probably about 5 or 6 different landowners and trying to mostly prevent conflict with domestic livestock. So there's several different cattle operations in the valley here with several different feed lines of just domestic livestock, and so what we're trying to do is basically bait the elk away from those. So you can see here we just laid out a bait line this morning. You can still probably see some of the elk on the hill that we just pushed off of it, but basically we're trying to keep them baited away from those producers. With the baiting operation, our goal is to minimize conflict with domestic livestock. Our goal isn't to give the elk 100% as much nutrition as they need to get through the winter. Our goal is to minimize the conflict. What we've been doing today with the snow machines is taking out little bales of hay and kind of scattering a trail so that we can catch these elk as they kind of move back and forth along the river corridor. And then at one point or another, they'll run into that bait trail, and then that's just enough hay to kind of give them something to follow into the main area where we want to be baiting them. So if we were feeding elk, we'd be trying to get them as much as we could to help their body condition and that, but that's not our goal. Our goal is to minimize the conflict with livestock. Another thing to keep in mind is certainly CWD. This group here is about 250 elk now, and it started as 3 or 4 different bunches of 40 to 70 elk, and now they're all in one spot. And we're solving a lot of landowner conflict issues here by this operation, but on a larger scale we need to be thinking about that down the line as far as transmission of CWD when we congregate animals like that. Every landowner is different, and it's not a one-size-fits-all approach for solving their problems. So a lot of times we actually need to go out to their ranch and sit down, have a cup of coffee, and visit with them and see what's going on, and then we can figure out the best approach from there.
We can't, as ranchers, can't afford to have the elk on our feed grounds, not only for the hay they eat, but for safety of our cattle. The division has really stepped up, and really our cooperation with them this year is exceptional. We really appreciate them. We appreciate these guys, and they're baiting these elk off and trying to help us.
Like I said, game damage is pretty much a full-time job right now. So we're baiting on several different locations that actually CPW is doing in-house, and then also keeping our landowners supplied with hay to bait away from their livestock conflicts, or just going out and looking at whatever new issues they might have, like if they had a new haystack get busted into and they need panels to fix it.
We've distributed about 750 tons of hay so far in the Yampa Valley and along the White River there too, out towards Rangeley. We're working with about 100 different landowners at this point, probably affecting around 5,000 elk when you kind of put everything together.
Something that we need to keep in mind moving forward this winter is just what we can handle and what's realistic. We've got thousands and thousands of animals on the landscape, so unfortunately, we can't impact all of them. We're targeting high conflict areas and just baiting those critters away from domestic conflict at this point. HPP's been pretty essential to funding the operations that we're doing out here. They're paying for a lot of this hay. We've exhausted all of our state wildlife area hay in the region, and so at this point we're buying a lot of hay from different producers to keep these different baiting operations going and to keep giving hay to landowners that are dealing with conflict as we can. So all that funding's come through HPP.
A huge thanks to all landowners that we are working with and that we haven't even heard from, because some of them are just dealing with it on their own. So we really appreciate the help and the patience with elk. It's a community effort, not only Parks and Wildlife, but all of our local ranchers and landowners and even citizens of Craig and Rangeley and Meeker. Everybody's stepped up to help out in some form or capacity. So it's kind of been all the way across the board.
Anything else, Commissioner Haskett? Or does it speak for itself?
I think it speaks for itself, but they are doing this 7 days a week, so it's a full-time job definitely, and I thank what they're doing for all the people out there.
And Commissioner Haskett is on her personal time doing nothing but shovel snow and move snow, so I know that's true as well. Thank you for bringing that to our attention. I suspect we might hear more about that later today. So, other comments, questions, presentations, what you've been doing? What you been up to? I know there's others. Commissioner Adams.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Sorry. And thank you for IT for helping me to not break my computer in trying to get online. So thank you so much. And thank you for that video, Commissioner Haskett, and just that reminder of the additional things and steps that we take. And elk are not the only ones eating, right? Other wildlife are eating the things that we put out. And it's really critical that people understand the balance. I feel like a lot of our work sometimes feels like we're focusing on big game only, and that's just not the reality of the situation. You hear a lot about herds, and herd management, but there's also just a huge effort for all wildlife. So thank you for that visual to ground us. I did do quite a bit in between all of the wolf meetings, and I'm excited to share that once I figure out how to share on Zoom. So thank you for your patience as I deal with this technology. All right, so did I get it to play? There we go. All right, I don't know what that is. I hope it does things. So just a quick update on the Colorado Natural Areas Program. We were not able to schedule a meeting or a site visit for the proposed tall grass prairie natural areas designation. So we're hoping to get that scheduled in the next couple of months. They're hoping to bring a proposal, I believe, in May or sometime shortly thereafter. So that's a reason why we wanted to offer the tour, and we'll be sure now to video and be able to provide that back to those who were not able to join. Also wanted to just remind folks that the next meeting will be on June 6th. My term ends in May, and so we will need to identify another Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commissioner to serve on the critically important Colorado Natural Areas Program or Council. I had the extreme pleasure of representing Colorado Parks and Wildlife at the 50th annual Black Ski Summit at Vail. The National Brotherhood of Skiers, in partnership with Vail Resorts, the town of Vail, Vail Valley Partnerships, hosted the 50th anniversary, 10 days and over 2,000 participants in Vail. Founded in 1972, the National Brotherhood of Skiers really, again, introduced snow sports, or rather, I like to say reintroduced snow sports to African-American community, creating a huge family and smashing the idea that black folks don't ski. And as a fellow skier, it was very exciting to see so many folks. They had incredible clinics about backcountry skiing, skiing competitions. They had a parade that I had an opportunity to participate in through Vail Village as a member of the BIPOC Mountain Collective. And again, you know, when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, they've been doing this for 50 years. We've been doing this for 50 years, and that's just here in skiing. And so just remembering that, you know, oftentimes we're just hiding in plain sight. And in equity and diversity inclusion is the opportunity for us to have a seat at the table just like everybody else. So thank you so much, and congratulations to the National Brotherhood of Skiers and all of those that flew in and brought business to Vail, and all the business owners in Vail who had these incredible displays and welcoming, and it just is a different feeling than when I first went to Vail 10 years ago to ski. So thank you. I also wanted to lift up the Next 100 Colorado Elevating Voices student documentary screening that happened in Denver last week. There was a cohort of students that worked with mentors from Next 100 Colorado to produce a documentary highlighting the important intersection between conservation and justice. And I'm hopeful that the CPW team and leadership team and others have the opportunity to watch the video or screen the video. Perhaps it can be a part of a professional development opportunity, but it was very powerful to just see who's having these conversations, many conversations that are similar to the conversations that we have, and we're not at the same table. So I'm really looking forward to healing that divide, and some of that will be happening through our meeting tonight. I also serve on the Office of Tourism's Destination Stewardship Advisory Council, and the Advisory Council is tasked with supporting the Office of Tourism in defining destination stewardship, informing research on the progress towards a more regenerative approach to outdoor recreation, and the council informs marketing and communication needs. They shared a couple of resources. There's a video on destinations at risk, the invisible burden of tourism, which outlines the unseen costs of tourism and brief solutions. And there's also a report, but some of the recommendations included some of the things that we have been talking about around demand management in the public domain, for example. And it's really wonderful. We do have a CPW staff member who serves on this council, but quite honestly, I would recommend that we may want to consider in the future revisiting the different places that commissioners serve, and considering maybe expanding to some of these other newer tables that are going to significantly impact the work that we're doing. We know we saw unprecedented attendance at our state parks, state wildlife areas everywhere over the last 3 years, and those numbers aren't really going down. And we know the impacts that that's having on the land, on the habitat, and on the wildlife. And again, so just really excited to be a part of that conversation, and I'm hopeful that CPW plays a larger role in that conversation. I also had the opportunity to drive up to Granby for one day to attend Living in Mountain Lion Country. And I want to thank Jeremy Huntington, Serena Ruxand, Jean Abram, Rachel Gonzalez for an informative and actionable presentation that talked about the escalating interactions and conflicts between mountain lions and community. I also was thinking about and wanting to go to this because I'm realizing we have a roof reintroduction. And so I was curious about how are we dealing with mountain lions, right, which we have across this state. And it was very inspiring to have so many community members show up. And some considerations I thought were interesting were, again, the reminder of just habitat, right, and the reduced habitat and resources. Recreation, and 92% of Coloradans recreate, and that doesn't include visitors. Human population growth and transportation, but there was one piece that Jean Abram brought up that I thought was quite interesting, and that was technology. Like, we have the capacity through rings and all these other things to actually see things that we weren't seeing before. So even though we've seen this escalating and reporting, there's a likelihood that they were already there. They just didn't know they were there. And so that was just something that I hadn't considered. So again, just the importance of educating our public, particularly those that have rings, and ways to see wildlife at night in ways that they hadn't before, I think will be absolutely critical. But again, just thank you for hosting that, and it was really incredible to be a part of it. I also had an opportunity, I'll leave two more. I also had an opportunity to participate through CPW, assessing drought in a changing climate technical workshop that was hosted by NOAA and the National Integrated Drought Information System Program. There were over 100 scientists, natural resource staff, and other stakeholders to collaborate on addressing drought at the intersection of aridification, humanifying climate, and risk. Some of the cross-cutting themes that we looked at that were applicable to the work that we do here are policy and planning challenges, communication challenges, equity in drought management. One of my favorite reads was The Definition and Determination of Climate Changes, Fluctuations, and Outcomes by Dr. Lindsberg. He released it in 1975, and it was so crazy to read it and see, again, the conversations we're having right now, right, on how challenging it is to define things, on how hard it is to measure things, on how hard it is. They even made a reflection on if he could get rid of one word in the English language, it would be normal. There is no normal, and I just really appreciated those reminders as we are addressing the challenges that we're facing here. There is no normal. We are making this up as we go along, and we're doing the best we can. I want to thank my subtopic group on aridification and that team, and note that all the pre-workshop materials, which there were hundreds and hundreds of pages of reading, and recordings of the technical webinar that happened before, and those resources. We're going to be coming together in 6 months. Their teams are working on all of the different research questions and things that we created during that session, and I'd be happy to share that with anybody who's interested in knowing. But one of the reflections that I had, and I've been asking more and more questions around it, is just how we are addressing climate in our herd management. How are we addressing, how is climate being addressed in this conversation? I know we brought this up when we were talking about the donut and for the wolf reintroduction, right? We know that the climate is changing, and so that may affect, and yes, wolves are very adaptive. However, right, I just am excited to see a stronger representation of that conversation in the work that we do here. Thank you so much, and I look forward to the rest of the meeting.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. And I saw somewhere, I was trying to find it, that you're keynote speaking at something coming up. So congratulations on that to some organization. Sorry, it's not at the top of my list. I saw it scrolling around somewhere. Anyway, congratulations on that. Other comments, questions? What have you been up to? Commissioner Vardy, I know that you're out in cyberspace, if you'd like to jump in.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just say quickly, thank you to the leadership team and to our chair for continuing to host meetings on the eastern slope and in the Front Range. It seems every time we do, we get significant weather, and it's really helping our water table out here on the west side. So thanks for doing that.
Yeah, somehow bomb cyclones and COVID and other things happen when we're scheduled to meet in Aurora, Colorado, or Denver, Front Range. Any other comments, questions before we move on? Commissioner Adams?
I did forget about one thing that I wanted to raise with this group. So I talked a lot about the diversity and equity and inclusion work that had been happening in different places, and I would be remiss if I did not bring up something I've seen a trend around, and that is DEI is a distraction to the work. In the resignations for the Wildlife Council, it was explicitly referenced that DEI was a distraction to the work. I was saddened to see that, but if that's what your belief is, then this isn't the council for you. This isn't, or rather, we have made a commitment as an agency and as a state to ensure that everyone, regardless of race, class, geography, gender, etc., disability, sexual orientation, are treated with the respect and dignity and understanding as anyone else is. I will say, I am so grateful for the cultural changes that we have been able to make in this agency since I arrived 4 years ago. But it is not far enough. I can't have another commissioner come on and have to navigate noose jokes and being called a racist. I can't have another staff person come in and deal with some of the discriminatory and absolutely unacceptable issues that I have encountered as the first Black woman in this commission. And to read that and to see what happened at the Partners Conference, and then to see that, and then to see it reiterated in letters, was very disheartening. Very disheartening. You may not like the way that it is implemented. Sure, we can disagree, right, on the implementation. But what we can never disagree on is our collective humanity. We can never disagree on that. We can never disagree. We can never say we can't make space or time. It just can't happen. And so I'm just hopeful that as my term comes to an end, that the efforts that we have put in, that those who came in and served in this agency when there were employees that had nooses in their office in the 80s. Nooses in their office. This is unacceptable. This is not who we are. And I'm just so grateful to be in a group of people who have made that commitment, to be in an agency that made that commitment, to be in a state that made that commitment. It is not easy and it is not fun, but it's necessary. So thank you so much for making it a priority. And thank you for those who, if that's not a priority for you, then this isn't the team for you. This isn't the place for you. So I hope that they are willing to come back, because I'm never willing to close the door on anybody. There's always a space for redemption. But I just had to say, I had to raise the flag and say, no, no, no. It's not a distraction. It's a necessary component of this work. It is fairness. It is life, liberty, and justice for all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Adams. That's a heavy one, and I think an appropriate one. And my only addition to Commissioner Adams' comments is that it is not mutually exclusive. It is an and both. We will work on conservation issues and all the things that are at the mission of CPW. And to Commissioner Adams' comments, we will continue to evolve and be a place where everyone is welcome and everyone feels that they belong. So thank you for those comments. My only addition is, which seems somewhat perfunctory after that important set of comments, is that there was an online forum town hall, can't remember what it was called, Travis, regarding Sweetwater Lake. I know that we have followed that fairly closely. And so I just want to thank the Northwest region, Jacob Ray and others, people from the staff from the U.S. Forest Service, from the Eagle Valley Land Trust and others to sort of update the public and invite what I would describe as sort of a larger net to be part of those conversations and to receive an update. I know Commissioner Blecka was on that call. Executive Director Gibbs joined in to listen. I think that's all I saw. Others may have tuned in to that in the background, but I just want to say thanks for continuing to engage the public and a sort of a broader set of stakeholders in those conversations. We've certainly heard from the local commission and the neighbors, and we all obviously all visited that particular site, and that planning continues to move forward. So that's the one thing I think I would stand up since our last meeting that I participated in anyway, other than what we've all been doing. Okay, anything else from commissioners? Questions, comments, anything you've been up to? Okay. Thank you very much for that. Sorry, Commissioner Bailey.
No,
Please.
just real quick, I wanted to just thank Commissioner Adams for her comments and also, uplift the point that it's that this is meant to be a collective, open, and inclusive space, and that it strongly aligns with the broader goals of conservation. And I think as we're trying to figure out how we do this work, it's just important to keep those principles in mind. So I just wanted to second that and acknowledge that.
Thank you, Commissioner Bailey. Okay, any other questions, comments from the commission before we move on? Okay. I think I've probably said what I need to say at this point, other than, again, thank you to the commission for your stamina over the next couple of days. I know Executive Director Gibbs and Commissioner Greenberg, I believe, are in the same place in Steamboat at water meetings, if I'm not mistaken. Executive Director Gibbs will be here tomorrow, and my understanding is that Kate might pop in virtually if she can. So we are well represented. I'll turn it first for the Department of Natural Resources update to Tim Mock, and then we'll go to the Ag update.
Good morning, Madam Chair. Thank you, members of the commission. Tim Mock, Deputy Director for the Department of Natural Resources. Director Gibbs does send his regards. He is in Steamboat. He will be back here tomorrow. I just also want to acknowledge Commissioner Adams' remarks. EDI continues to be a priority for this administration, for the department and its divisions. So thank you very much. Several updates here. We'll start with staffing at the Department of Natural Resources, particularly the Executive Director's office. This February, we brought aboard a new Assistant Director for Energy Innovation, Aaron Ray. He formerly worked at OSPB with the state and the National Conference of State Legislatures, where he managed energy policies there. We have also, as you've been hearing, we've been advertising or we're hiring a tribal liaison position for the department. That position listing has closed. We received an exceptionally strong response. I think we've had 62 applications meet minimum qualifications. So we are working through those right now to identify the top tier candidates to interview and hope to have somebody on by early April. Also, I hope I'm not stealing Acting Director Dugan's thunder here. DNR and Parks and Wildlife recently posted a legislative analyst position to assist our legislative director, focusing exclusively on Parks and Wildlife related legislative and policy issues, support stakeholder engagement, and work on Parks and Wildlife specific projects as needed. That position is open through March 23rd, I believe. Moving on to the budget here, the Joint Budget Committee is wrapping up their work on the fiscal 23-24 budget, which will be introduced for consideration by the full General Assembly in the coming weeks. They've been very supportive of our water-related budget items, voting unanimously to approve the request for a Colorado River Policy and Technical Support Team. This is 14 FTEs that will work to manage the negotiations on the Colorado River and establish the Colorado River Commissioner as a standalone position in the Executive Director's office. The Joint Budget Committee has also delayed action on a request for $12.6 million general fund for water plant grant program projects. It's not uncommon. They're waiting for the next March forecast, which is scheduled for tomorrow, and then we expect to move on this rather quickly. Also in the Executive Director's office, we recently just launched a pollinator study. This came out of Senate Bill 199 last year, and which required the Department of Natural Resources to conduct a study regarding state agency programs, resources, and needs related to the challenges associated with native pollinating insects, including recommendations regarding public education and outreach programs and protection of native pollinating insects. We've hired a consultant team that is led by CSU Extension and includes Xerces Society as the subcontractors. Also, in terms of legislation, I know this body gets legislative updates from Daphne, probably one just yesterday. We are at the halfway point for the legislative session here. Some of our bills, I think, outside of Parks and Wildlife that you might not be tracking. The House Bill 231125, modernizing process to obtain water well information, passed last week, just modernizes Division of Water Resources process to update well owner information. The CWCB projects bill has been introduced and will be heard in the Senate Ag next Thursday. Every year we run this water projects bill to fund projects and programs that preserve our water values for a productive economy, sustainable cities, viable and productive agriculture, a strong and healthy environment, and a robust recreation and tourism industry in Colorado. And then the annual Species Conservation Trust Fund bill is in the works. This one transfers funds for habitat improvements, projects, research, wildlife monitoring, and other priority projects that CPW and CWCB collaborate on for the benefit of threatened and endangered species around the state. And then some of you might have heard that given the urgent need to restore the health of our streams, watersheds, forests, DNR is also working with the legislature on a stream restoration bill to address what could be an insurmountable barrier to this work. The legislators committed significant funds to stream and watershed restoration. We expect hundreds of millions of dollars to flow into Colorado or become available through some of the federal infrastructure bills. And we've made this stream restoration bill a priority. It clarifies stream restoration projects with the Division of Water Resources and hopefully makes that process a little bit more seamless. Do want to touch on one thing that's Parks and Wildlife related. I received a phone call from the Arapahoe Roosevelt Forest Supervisor, Monty Williams, notifying us that the construction of the Devil's Thumb shooting range located in Clear Creek County along Highway 103 near Echo Lake will soon be completed. Some of you that were on this board or this commission a few years ago probably heard about this project. This was part of the Front Range Shooting Sports Partnership, where Clear Creek, Boulder, Gilpin, and Larimer counties, I was serving as county commissioner in Clear Creek County at the time, came together to identify certain agreed upon closures of national forest lands to dispersed recreational shooting in exchange for the construction of a certain number of lanes associated with those closures, those shooting lanes. So as part of the Dingle Act, the Forest Service needs to notify us when they begin to make closures, and this shooting range, Devil's Thumb, will allow some of the closures in Clear Creek County to proceed forward. I specifically want to point out Mark Leslie, who's regional manager during this time, who spent considerable time. It was about a 4 or 5 year project, essentially, and for his work around that collaborative process that I thought really gave a pretty good win-win type of example for the state. So thank you, Mark, for your and your team's effort on that. CWCB has some new appointments. Director Greg Felt was re-upped. Director Lori Cloud from Ignacio, Director Nathan Combs from La Jara, and Director Barbara Vasquez from Caldry have all been appointed and confirmed by the Senate. CWCB is looking to hold a drought summit on May 31st and June 1st at History Colorado in Denver. The agenda and speakers are being developed and more information will be provided. In the land of Division of Reclamation Mining Safety, DRMS will begin characterization drilling at the Marshall Underground Coal Mine Fire next week in cooperation with the City of Boulder Open Space Program. Numerous borings will be completed to determine the extent and intensity of the underground mine fire to assist in developing a mitigation strategy. The Colorado State Forest Service has recently posted or published the 2022 report on the health of Colorado's forests. The report includes the latest on forest insects and diseases, analysis of living with wildfire, and watershed protection, regional updates, and forest health issues, interactive maps and data, and more. You can find that online at the State Forest Service's website. And then finally, the Colorado Geographic Naming Advisory Board. I think you all have probably seen in the news that Governor Polis concurred with the Naming Advisory Board's recommendation to rename Mount Evans, located in Clear Creek County, to Mount Blue Sky. The U.S. Board of Geographic Names, that is the sole decision maker, the ultimate decision maker on this, met on March 9th, but tabled this item until at least April. The Northern Cheyenne tribe has expressed concerns with the name Mount Blue Sky. They actually submit their own proposal and requested consultation, which I believe is occurring this week. The Naming Advisory Board is waiting for new members to be appointed, and then we expect to resume its business in early April. We've got about 5 pending proposals already before us dealing with removal of derogatory names, and we'll begin that work as soon as that board is appointed. And that concludes my report. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay, any questions for Tim? Commissioner May.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Tim, as I understand it, the stream restoration bill has not been presented yet, but is scheduled to be presented.
It has, yeah, that is correct, Commissioner. Thanks for the question. It has not been introduced. I think we were looking at this Friday. We have done extensive work with stakeholders. It's gone through several iterations. I know that there's still some comments coming in and some work to be done. So whether or not we hit the Friday deadline or it's early next week, we'll keep you posted.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions for Tim? Who I presume will be with us the balance of the day and this evening, hopefully. Okay, great. Okay, we'll move to our Department of Ag update from Wayne East.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, everyone. As Tim mentioned, Commissioner Greenberg sends her regrets for not being here. We're co-hosting an Ag Commission meeting with the Colorado Water Conservation Board to discuss the implementation of the Colorado Water Plan and the future of ag water in Colorado. Commissioner Greenberg was out in the field yesterday in northwest Colorado, and she was visiting with some of our sheep producers up there, seeing the impacts of the winter weather. Many of the producers she spoke with work closely with CPW, and she wanted me to communicate the respect for CPW staff that she hears from the field. Per usual, there's a lot going on at CDA. As a reminder, our driving goals are fostering economic resilience for Colorado ag, advancing voluntary farmer and rancher-led stewardship, supporting future generations, and advancing animal health and welfare. On economic resilience, we continue to invest in local and regional processors to expand rural, family-owned businesses and give producers more market options. We created a new food systems unit in our markets division to help grow local and regional food systems. And we continue to support our food and ag businesses entering international markets. On stewardship, last fall, CDA became the only state Department of Ag in the country to be the project lead on a USDA Climate Smart Commodities grant. We are set to receive $25 million for Colorado farmers and ranchers, as well as producers across 6 other western states to advance farmer-led climate smart ag practices. We are connecting these producers to buyers who share our commitment to climate resilience and climate solutions. We were also successful in applying for a $4 million America the Beautiful grant that will allow us to partner with dozens of organizations from across the state to work toward watershed health. We're very excited that the JBC recently approved our budget request package, and among the requests in this package are a climate marketing specialist to find competitive market opportunities for our Saving Tomorrow's Ag Resources, or STAR, soil health participants, as well as an ag water advisor, so we have a full-time voice representing ag on water issues. I know Commissioner Adams was mentioning climate, and just yesterday we posted for a brand new position of Deputy Conservation Division Director and Climate Resilience Specialist. This position will be critical in supporting our conservation team and driving our climate resilience work across the state. We welcome any and all with the passion and experience to apply. On our Next Gen work, last fall we announced a brand new Next Gen competitive grant program. The department just funded the initial grant recipients, which are organizations investing in youth agricultural leadership development, and we expect to announce the next grant cycle later this spring. In the last few months, CDA, through our lending partner, First Southwest Bank, has issued over $12 million in beginning farmer loans. We created a new ag worker liaison position to expand our outreach to and support of Colorado's ag worker communities. And we continue to support farm families and succession planning. And lastly, on that front, we're looking forward to hosting all of our Western State Departments of Ag in Denver this summer. It's our version of WAFWA, it's WASDA. And where we're launching a Next Gen Scholarship Fund for young people to meet with top agency officials from DC and across the West. We're expanding our work into food access and equity. We are currently accepting applications for the Community Food Access Program Advisory Committee, and I have more information for any commissioners who are interested in that. And on our animal health and welfare front, we're continuing to monitor HPAI. Fortunately, we're in a little bit of a lull right now, but we do expect an uptick in cases with the spring migration. Our state vet, Dr. Maggie Baldwin, issued guidance for fairs, shows, and events that state that the decision to postpone or cancel poultry shows, sales, swaps, and events is up to the local event organizers, except in the case of quarantine, health order, or movement restriction. And since it's a Farm Bill year, we are also expanding our engagement on federal farm policy to ensure the best possible direction for Colorado ag. And lastly, internally, we are 1/4 of our way into a year-long inclusive leadership training program that CDA established late last year. Nearly 1/3 of our staff and all of our supervisors are taking part of this in-depth training, and I can expand on that if anybody has any questions on that as well. But with that, Madam Chair, that concludes the update.
Okay, thank you very much. Any questions for Wayne? So thorough. Okay, thank you very much for that update. Lots going on this time of year, obviously. So So we'll move directly to the director comments from Acting Director Dugan.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this. I have a number of updates that I'd like to share with you all today. The first one is the co-op that we have. And as Commissioner Adams mentioned earlier, there are 3 openings due to resignations. So I want to give you all an update on where we're at with that. The application process for the 2 sports persons positions closed this Monday, the 13th. We received 44 applications, and so we will be, in the next few weeks, going through all of the applications and choosing who the next 2 sports persons representatives are. So we're very excited about that. And then as for the other vacancy, that was an at-large position. So once we get the 2 sports persons positions filled, we are going to open applications for that position as well. We're very excited to move forward and do good work in the co-op. The next thing I'd like to talk about is the latest sports persons roundtable that we had on Saturday, March 4th. It was a very lively conversation at times, and it was also it was a very necessary conversation, and it was real and it was authentic. And for all of the sports persons who participated in that, thank you for working through some difficult times with us. And we need to continue to work together to just further our mission. And it was ultimately a very productive meeting. I'd like to especially thank Jonathan Boydston for wrangling all of us in that meeting and keeping us on task and helping us to have the conversations that we needed to have. And Katie Lanter also was a key player in that. So thank you to both of you. Moving on, I'd like to share a couple of personnel updates with everybody. First of all, I want to give an update on the Southeast Region Manager application process. So we did go through, and where we are standing in the process right now is we have 6 excellent applicants, all of whom would do a fantastic job as Southeast Region Manager. We're going to go ahead and just pause where we are in the process right now, just due to the timing for the selection of the next director. I would like to have the next director have the choice to make that selection for that key position on the leadership team. So realistically, we're about 3 or so weeks out. In the meantime, I want to give a special thanks to Mitch Martin for serving for an extended period of time as the acting Southeast Region Manager. Appreciate your work, appreciate your perspective, and you've been a good part of the team, so thank you for that. With regard to the Information and Education Assistant Director position, the application process closed a couple of weeks ago, so we have a strong list of candidates that will be working on filling that position. We have not gotten to the comparative analysis yet, so that will be up to the next director to decide where they want to go with that, but at least some of the groundwork has been done to fill that position as well. That is a key position and one of the positions that's very critical for the success of our agency. So I would also like to thank Kristen Cannon and Rebecca Farrell for the outstanding work that they've done in serving as the acting assistant directors for information and education. It's been a pleasure to work with both of you, and your perspectives are refreshing, and you bring a lot to the table with regard to the leadership team. And then I'd be remiss in not thanking my replacement for right now, Mr. Ty Petersburg. Thank you for filling in for my position in the last 10 months. It's been a pleasure to work with you. Sometimes it's been difficult to let go, but it's been pretty neat to see the work that you've done and the energy that you bring and provide for our officers in the field, and just as a just an overall good hand. So thank you so much for that. There are a couple of other things that I want to share with you. First of all, last week, Colorado and Utah chapters of the Wildlife Society met in person for the first time in about 4 years. They met in Grand Junction, and it was a fantastic opportunity for biologists and scientists to be able to come together across state lines, because our wildlife does not know the state line boundaries, and to just work together cooperatively on a lot of projects and just share a lot of information. I want to give a special shout out to the Colorado chapter of the Wildlife Society. This is their 50th year, so long-standing group that's done a lot of good work for wildlife conservation in the state. And then finally, I wanted to share something that I've been privileged to be working on for the past couple of months. The Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, or AFWA, put together a One Health task force, and I want to share a little bit of information with you on that. So the One Health philosophy, as you probably are all aware, is founded on the principle that human health is dependent upon animal health, both wild and domestic, and also ecosystem health, and that all components must be addressed in a cohesive, comprehensive manner to support and improve global health security. While leaders in the human health and domestic livestock arenas have emerged, there is a need for greater representation from the fish, wildlife, and habitat sectors in North America, and most especially globally. This circumstance provides a unique opportunity for the Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies to position itself as a leader in this space to safeguard both wildlife and human health via the One Health approach, but also importantly through such engagement to bring fish and wildlife management issues to the forefront of policymakers' agendas, and at the same time capture a wider community of interest in the issues and realities facing wildlife and wildlife agencies. And this is really important too, because it also brings in the fact that we have outdoor recreation that is very important and is part of the broader picture. So I have been honored to be selected to serve on the task force, and I am serving on two committees and co-chairing one, and I'm looking forward to see how Colorado fits into this process, and I just wanted to share that with you, and I think that's all I've got.
Okay, that's a lot. Questions for Heather? Okay, not seeing any. I might, just before we bring up Justin, was remiss and forgot, this is a little bit tangential, maybe our GoCo folks will mention this, but I did just want to flag a really remarkable and amazing donation to History Colorado, which some of you may have been following. John Fielder, who is happens to be a personal friend, but also is just, I would call him sort of the visual chronicler of Colorado's amazing wild spaces as a very prominent photographer, has donated his entire collection, every single bit of it, to History Colorado. And it's aided by a grant. Sometimes those gifts come to organizations and then they don't have the capacity to do anything with it. But they've already gotten through 30% of the digitization of those, of the photographs that were sort of the, kind of early versions of photographs, and are putting all of that into files and means by which the public can access it for obviously for historic purposes, but also for science and for chronicling climate change and all the things that John has been just such a champion for. So it is a really remarkable gift. John was one of the original sort of founders of GoCo, or was really very involved in the initiation of GoCo. So I would encourage you, as you have time, to get to History Colorado. There's already a number of his pieces, and there will be a sort of a dedicated area, exhibition area of some of his work. But it certainly is beautiful, and it was great to be there for the event where he sort of did that formally and extended that really remarkable gift. And I was just reminded of that when I saw our GoCo folks, who a couple of those were at the event. Okay, Justin, come on up. Tell us how we're doing. So for members of the public, we are on item number 9, which is our financial update from Justin Rutter.
Thank you, Madam Chair, directors, Deputy Director Deputy Director Mock, Commissioners, good morning. My name is Justin Rudder. I'm the Assistant Director for Financial and Capital Services for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. And today I've got a financial update for you. Including in your mailing is the Q2, second quarter of the state fiscal year financial update. So this includes data through December 31st of 2022. And of course, we are sitting here in the middle of March, nearly through Q3. But as I've mentioned in the past, due to the way the state accounting system works, it takes about 2 weeks after the close of an accounting period to get final data, which often makes it difficult for me to get a report turned around in time for a commission meeting, and we didn't have a meeting that I could present at last month. As you go through the report, you may notice some changes. We're working on a transition of the report to get more longer-term data series. So within the revenue detail, you will see that we are providing 5 years of data in the report now. The reason for this is in the past, it seemed easy enough to compare how are we doing this year to how were we doing last year, but things have been changing rather drastically and quickly over time. So I'm hoping that by providing that longer series of data, it's more easy to see trends and see abnormalities so that you can get a better picture of what's happening with our revenues. That being said, if we compare this year to last year, overall, we are relatively flat on expenses and revenues. We saw approximately $3 million less in revenue and $3 million more in expenses as a division. So that overall. On the revenue side of the equation, there's some mixed messages there. You can see combined in parks, revenues are going down with wildlife revenues heading up, with the total being that $3 million reduction. If we look into more of the detail that was in the report itself, there's a slight decrease in revenues from license passes, fees, and permits of $3 million. It's about a $2.7 million or 2.7% reduction. There's more significant declines in federal revenues of about $4.8 million, which is a 25% reduction. But our federal grants are paid on a reimbursable basis. So that means if we didn't incur an expense, we don't see a revenue. So there should be a corresponding decrease in expenses related to those federal grants. There's a significant decrease in general fund support. However, that's related to some of those one-time transfers and kind of one-time appropriations to the agency. And it also attributable to the recovery of the severance tax trust fund, which is paid off of oil and gas revenues. We get transfers from that fund when it was struggling and didn't have revenues for the transfers. The General Assembly chose to backfill with general fund. And so that's why you will see kind of a net zero swap between severance tax and general fund in the overall report. On the expense side of the agency, we see significant growth in personal services of $5.8 million, or about 10%, and operating of $5.5 million, or about 20%. This represents increased staffing and increased salaries, and also increased operating resources that have been made available to the cost centers to do the work. That kind of increase in expenses offset partially in the capital program primarily due to a reduction in capital acquisitions, which is a very variable program. The timing of real estate transactions is not uniform over time. Overall, for the agency, revenues exceeded expenses by $52 million. So kind of drilling into some of the product detail, there is a direct reduction in state overall in the sale of state park products of 1.3 million, or 5.8%, and a large reduction to federal grants. However, if we look at the detail here, regular annual pass sales have gone up during the pandemic and remain elevated. So those are annual sales, while the vehicle daily passes have a significant spike during the pandemic and returned to pre-pandemic levels. Of course, those two slides are going to change drastically with the introduction of Keep Colorado Wild. You'll expect to see those two products decrease while we see Keep Colorado Wild product sales increase. On the bottom there, the camping total, you can see that the camping took off during the pandemic, and we continue to see elevated levels of revenue from those reservations. So looking more at volume, we can see a little bit more detail in our product sales. The hunting participation, that it's a little jumbled there, but the point I'm trying to make is the tall blue line is our elk resident licenses, and we can see a kind of a steady decrease over time, whereas other products remain relatively flat with slight increases in some areas. If you get into the number detail and the volume detail, you can see it a little more clearly. It's more or less flat, but a slight decline in elk residents. Fishing participation is another interesting story. The blue line is the fishing resident. Those are our resident fishing sales, and you can see that we had a spike during pandemic, and we've actually returned to pre-pandemic levels, or below pre-pandemic levels. And also the same with the non-residents, a spike and kind of a return to the previous levels. With that, I would welcome any questions.
Okay, questions for Justin, Commissioner Touchton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Justin, I had two. That $52 million surplus, what are our plans for that? And then if we have any data on how Keep Colorado Wild is performing versus our expectations.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner. Yeah, so the $52 million surplus, it's important to keep in mind, is across 25 funds. That changes pretty much every year as the legislature gets involved, but about 25 different cash funds. So those will be primarily in parks cash and wildlife cash, but also a number of other funds. Fortunately for the excess revenue, the leadership team met last week to do our annual budget process. We have selected a number of proposals from staff as far as staffing, operating increases or otherwise, that we will be pursuing in the legislature next year. And additionally, that kind of the excess revenue informs my capital program for the next year. So as we have money in the bank, that informs how much money is available for our capital construction program. And then on Keep Colorado Wild, so I hesitate to take even the amount of data we do have. We have seen strong sales. There's approximately a 30% opt-in rate at this point, or staying opted in rate, which is significant. Of that 30%, about 1% is no fee for various reasons, veterans plates and that sort of thing, where we have a policy of not charging that fee. But that is very encouraging. I can't give good news without giving bad news, and so I think the real interesting data points will come even a year out, where people have had a chance to experience the Keep Colorado Wild Pass, and if we don't deliver quality experience, then they might not come back. So I want to see that trend continue across the year, and I hope we can keep it going into year 2 and 3.
Okay, Commissioner Adams and then Commissioner Blecka.
Awesome. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Justin. Always a pleasure to see these numbers. It's a very grounding experience. I will say, based on the numbers that you show, it looks like we're doing great. However, when I go to our parks and I go to our programs and I go to meetings and I talk to visitors and staff and policymakers, there's a misconception around what the agency needs and what we're working on. And I compare it to the issue that we had in Boulder around our public libraries, right? Our public libraries look beautiful. They are gorgeous. They got programs. It looks like they've got staff. Little did we know that it has been operating at 60% capacity since the 70s, right? Because you just make it look so good. And so that's my concern, is that we make it look so good, but we know that staff needs to be paid more. We know that the cost of living is prohibiting our staff to be able to live where they work, which is essential to the work that they do. And so I guess I'm just wondering, I feel like there's a disconnect between what is needed and what we have. I don't know, again, with the increase in the staffing, with the increased participation in our state parks, you just mentioned, it'll be critical that our park participants have a quality experience in order for them to be able to continue to pay in. And so, again, although I appreciate this, I'm excited for the dashboard I know that you're working on to tell the story, and perhaps some other opportunities or mechanisms to better tell the story that, yeah, we're doing great, but we're working at a deficit, right? And that there's still opportunities to expand and to grow to meet the quality that is needed. Again, I just have concerns about legislators coming after a surplus for the Keep Colorado Wild Pass, knowing that those funds are urgently needed for restoration, mitigation, park experience, visitor centers, et cetera. So that's one, it's not so much a question, but a comment. And I have some concerns about how we're telling the story versus what the realities of the situation that we're seeing when we only have 2 parks that are really making a profit on, right? I feel like the public needs to hear some of these other fiscal stories that we have to tell. And I'm hopeful that we've got an expanded comms team. We know we've got some additional communication needs for the reintroduction plan. And it's just looking too clean for me. So I'm hopeful that we can get into some more of that nuance. I'm hopeful that the dashboard will be able to tell that more nuanced story, as well as the comms team to be able to do that. The other question I had was about the dashboard and just any updates that you have on the fiscal dashboard that will allow the public, our partners, and policymakers to better understand our fiscal situation. Thank you.
Thank you for the question. To get to your second part first, I'd say the public-facing dashboard, which is going to be part of our website rollout, has been developed for some time. It just needs the technology for it to be able to be accessible through our website because we're using a Power BI type database that doesn't work with our older system. Separately, the 5 years of data that you see in the commission report, that's kind of a secondary effort that I'm undertaking. I hope by next meeting I have a dashboard as the beginning page of that report. So it'd be kind of slicers that you could use to dig in without actually going to the numbers a little more graphically, dig in at the top of the report. I have a few staff working on that currently, and I'm hoping the next time I bring a financial report that dashboard, that smaller dashboard, will be ready. On the employment and pay side of that is a complex story, and it's hard to get into in financials because it involves politics and laws and all that. The General Assembly is including in the next year's budget a 5% across-the-board increase at this point, which is not quite inflation, but it is a more significant increase than state employees have seen in the past. Built into that, which is called the total comp package, it's produced by the Department of Personnel Administration as a proposal to the legislature for what should be done. The pay scales for park rangers and wildlife managers have moved significantly. They were out of line with other law enforcement. And I don't know that this fixes it entirely or if it's the right level, but they did move those scales significantly so that we will have the ability to pay our staff more in line with the markets for those types of positions. The leadership team has undertaken a number of reviews over this year and the past few years, mostly focusing on job classes where we see inequity and fixing those, but also looking at kind of the longevity of our employees and recognizing that experience and making adjustments for that as well. So I do appreciate the comments. It's a hard story to tell and it's a harder problem to tackle, but we are looking at it.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. And again, just a reminder that the commission does not have the authority to set the budget or approve the budget. So again, I appreciate all the fiscal information that you're sharing, but I do think it's important that the public understand the roles and authorities that we do have here and who has the authority to make some of those fiscal changes that are so desperately needed. So thank you so much.
Okay, and I would just say we haven't forgotten, Commissioner Adams, the opportunity to do sort of an overview of state parks. We've been a little distracted with a few other items, so it is in the queue. So it has not been forgotten. It's in the parking lot, so thank you for that. Commissioner Blecka.
Thank you. Could you enlighten us and give us some background on the severance tax fund and maybe the short history of it to this point? And I have a couple other questions.
Yeah, certainly, Commissioner Blecka. So the severance tax fund, you're making me dig into memories to see if I can get any pertinent facts, but the severance tax is charged on the severance of natural resources from the ground. So it's charged by the state on the production of oil and gas and hard metals and other precious commodities. It is offset by the ad valorem tax, which is, so basically for producers that have, so producers owe severance tax, which is offset by their property taxes that they pay. And those two numbers are out of sync. They kind of, when production values are high, the land value goes really high. And when production values go down, land value is high for a couple of years until it drops again. So it's been a highly variable source. It is used to, so it's split into multiple departments. What we're concerned about is called the operational account of the Severance Tax Trust Fund, which is, most of it comes to DNR, but that's what CPW gets. And then it's distributed within that fund into the base programs, like such as support of state parks and aquatic nuisance species, and then the grant programs, which is kind of a more variable source. But we do annually get severance tax for aquatic nuisance species, support of state parks, and I might be forgetting one smaller piece.
Thank you. So, quite like a volatile fund, and maybe I'm dumbing it down, but at one point, we were on the general fund, and then we got kicked off and put on the severance tax, which then we also don't always get to support these basic services. I'm just telling the commission this so you guys understand what's happening. Do you think, I mean, down the road, is this something that is going to continue to be fluctuating, and or is there going to be growth to it, do you think?
Good questions. So if you go over the last 20 years, the Department of Natural Resources used to have general fund in a number of its agencies. Over time, that was reduced in favor of fees, other cash funds, or severance tax. The Division of Water Resources is the current division that receives the most general fund, followed by Colorado Parks and Wildlife. We have $125,000 we receive annually for veterans entry into state parks, and then the wolf funding that we are receiving now. Severance tax has been stabilized in recent years with the new reserve policies. There's kind of, the legislature has wrestled with it, and I think it's going to be more steady over time. In years that we have not received severance tax, the General Assembly has chosen to appropriate us general fund, so they've treated us very well in those situations. Whether we will continue to receive severance tax and general fund in the future is a good question. I think as we've diversified our funding sources and made more money, we are at risk for them saying, well, you don't need our money then. But it's something that we're looking at and talking about.
Thank you. I just wanted to have that conversation to kind of dovetail onto what Commissioner Adams was saying of, our funding isn't solid, period. So we just need to know that everything is in flux at all times, it seems like. My other question, in your report, it mentioned that vehicle day use had gone back up to pre-pandemic levels, and I was curious, or pre-something, sorry. Is there a reason for that, and can we get these people a pass?
So the vehicle daily pass had spiked during the pandemic and has gone back down to pre-pandemic levels. So we've kind of seen that return to the average. And for reasons, so we are looking at just the first 6 months of the fiscal year. It's been a pretty long and cold winter, and so that could have influenced the shoulder seasons significantly. I don't know for sure, but it's always an interesting thing to see. That's also a possible factor in the fishing licenses. When you see those cold falls come in, we tend to see a drop in revenue.
Okay. Thank you, and that's it. Thanks.
Thank you. Commissioner Blacka, other questions for Justin? Okay, seeing none, you're off the hot seat. Okay, I think up next we have GoCo in its once upon a time usual time slot. So I think we've gotten you back into the sequencing.
Cool. Good morning, Madam Chair, Commissioners, Deputy Director Mock, and Acting Director Dugan. It's a pleasure to be here this morning, and we just want to take a few moments and provide an update on our annual investment proposal through the agency. And then I want to introduce my colleague here, who's our Metro Denver Regional Program Officer, Matt Brady, who's going to talk a little bit about local investments. And then we'll wrap up quickly at the end, talking about a few GoCo-related items that may be of interest to the Commission. And before I move on, I just want to quickly note this slide here is highlighting a local investment from a few years back at Aurora Reservoir, where our funding updated and rebuilt this fishing pier that improves accessibility for all at the reservoir here in Aurora. There we go. So each year, half of our investments of GOCO funding are through Colorado Parks and Wildlife, and it's to support the agency's conservation, recreation, and wildlife management programming. And during the last commission meeting, I was really pleased to share with you highlights from last year's annual report of GOCO investments in CPW, just to showcase the great work that the agency is able to do with our support and partnership. So today, I just want to share an overview of what our investment proposal will look like for the coming fiscal year. And this proposal was just approved last week at our quarterly board meeting. So we'll jump into it a bit here. So I went too fast. I don't know what happened. There we go. So this year, the investment proposal will total just over $26 million to support our two constitutional funding purposes of outdoor recreation and wildlife that are directed through the agency. We do appreciate, Justin Rudder and his team being very collaborative and working with the GOCO team and coming up with the investment proposal. And so really what our goal is in showing this slide is we want to kind of find that intersection between GOCO's organizational values and CPW strategic goals. And I think we do a good job of that each year. Our investments go to a wide range of programs in the agency, including enhancing wildlife migration corridors and critical habitats, supporting native and threatened species, building trails and new park amenities, maintaining park infrastructure, removing invasive plants and fire hazards, and then inspiring children to connect with and love the outdoors. So with that said, I just want to touch on each of those investments in outdoor recreation. We're going to be providing just over $16 million in these four broad program buckets: establishing and improving state parks, public information, environmental education, the trails program, and then the water program within CPW. On the wildlife side of things, we're going to be investing just over $10 million this year in support of habitat management, wildlife heritage, wildlife education, and environmental education, and the wildlife viewing program in the agency. So right now, I'm going to hand it over to my colleague, Matt, who's going to talk a little bit about local investments from GOCO.
Swivel that over. Sweet. So again, hello. I think the last time I was at a commission meeting was with Emily Orbanek, like five years ago, so it's nice to be back. So my name is Matt Brady. I'm the program officer for the Denver metro area, and my region includes Denver, Adams, and Arapahoe counties. So a program officer, it sounds like you've met a few of my colleagues, but we essentially support communities in those regions with navigating our grant funding, crafting a competitive application, and helping support connecting partners in the region to hopefully meet some of our programmatic goals and get some dollars on the ground. So again, I support communities with all of our grant programs, and then also somewhat focus a little bit in on our fellowship program and the young people that are awarded funding through that program. There's a photo of me at my local park with my dog Sputnik in Southwest Denver. I've been in Colorado and the Denver area since 2013 and GOCO since 2016, and had the privilege to hold a few different roles at the organization. And I always think it's great to reference that I'm both an alumni of the Peace Corps program and AmeriCorps program based out of Colorado. And it is AmeriCorps Week right now, so if you know any folks in the program, definitely pat them on the back. So like Dan said, I am the Denver Metro Regional Officer, which roughly serves about 1.9 million folks, so about 32% of the state's population. Given the highly urban and dense nature of my region, projects mainly focus on more of the active recreation side, so your parks, playgrounds, paved trails, et cetera. This is further supported by roughly a 7-to-1 local government purpose dollar investment to date. So GOCO has our 4 quadrants of funding, and local government dollars, blow all of our other quadrants out of the water as far as dollars on the ground. Themes and priorities and challenges that we see in this sort of metro area include equitable access to the outdoors, quality and culturally relevant close-to-home opportunities to recreate, youth programming and activation of park spaces, and effective people management and overcrowding of parkland. And I'd like to highlight a few investments in this region that kind of dive into some of those themes. So the first one, I want to talk about the Highline Canal. So essentially, you could probably walk to it from this facility as you drive by. There's some signage you can even see of the trail. So the Highline Canal is a historical trail in the region. It's a 71-mile greenway that connects people to nature while moving through communities in Denver, Adams, and Arapahoe counties. Underinvestment and lack of inclusive community engagement in sections of trail in Aurora, Northeast Denver, and unincorporated Adams or Arapahoe counties has led to underutilization compared to other segments of the trail. The infusion of GOCO planning dollars with the Highline Canal Conservancy, I think it was about a year ago, hopes to accelerate engagement efforts and complete a vision for future improvements in these under-resourced communities, critically improving equitable access, increasing activation, and culturally relevant connections to nature for the well-being of local neighborhoods. So hopefully, we invested $146,000 in planning dollars, which is actually being matched by about almost $400,000 in local dollars. So hopefully we'll see this planning effort come around for some implementation in the next couple of years. The second project I think is worth sharing about is Heron Pond, which is a partnership with the City and County of Denver. So Denver Parks and Recreation's Heron Pond is a future 80-acre park and open space located within the Glowville community and adjacent to the South Platte River in North Denver, and will be one of the largest natural areas within the Denver park system. If you're not familiar, Glowville is a neighborhood that is considered a high equity needs community per the city and county's own equity index score. The active recreational components prioritized in this grant respond to community visions to invest in multi-generational spaces, including a central gathering area with playground, picnic areas, shade shelters, and looped walking paths. This is a strong multi-valued project that will bring safe and inclusive park access, something not available at this scale to communities in North Denver. GOCO, just last Friday, so this is a really, really new award, which we're excited about, invested $750,000, which is being matched by about $2 million in local funding. And the last project is the metro area hosts a number of our Generation Wild communities. So I'd like to kind of highlight one that specifically is in the northeast part of the city. So Generation Wild Northeast Metro Coalition serves Commerce City, Northwest Aurora, and Denver's Montbello and Northeast Park Hill neighborhoods, and is an investment in places, programs, and pathways to get youth and families into the outdoors, both near and far. Since starting with planning dollars in 2015, the Northeast Metro Coalition has since been awarded $4.7 million in GOCO funding, being currently matched by $3.4 million in coalition and partner participation in kind and cash donations. These grants typically have a lifespan up until about 2026, so that hopefully $3.4 million will go up in match dollars as well. These coalitions are broad and comprehensive, so some of the project partners worth mentioning is obviously those local government partners, so Commerce City, Aurora, Denver, but also some of our federal partners in the area, which is the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service out at the Arsenal, Colorado Parks and Wildlife out at Bar Lake State Park, Bluff Lake Nature Center, Boys and Girls Clubs, Environmental Learning for Kids, Groundwork Denver, Mile High Youth Corps, and the list really goes on and on. I like to also highlight, I think sometimes it's valuable to put some numbers behind some of their work, as it can sometimes feel really broad. So this is just really pertaining to last winter, spring, and summer. The coalition as a whole hosted 387 programs for about 8,800 youth and young adults for over 1,600 hours of outdoor programming, as well as provided access to 50 paid jobs for over 3,300 hours of work. So this is, again, providing free and low-cost options to youth and families to get outside, but also paying young people to explore these positions and see if they're a viable option for a future career path. Grant funds have given vital nonprofits and local governments the funding they need to move to stability and expansion of their services, which I think is not always the case for our nonprofit community. So those are the three I wanted to highlight, so I'll hand it back to you.
Well, thank you, Matt, for that. Appreciate that. I'll wrap up here by just talking about a few upcoming items, related to GOCO's work I think you'll all be interested in. We're continuing supporting the statewide planning process. As I mentioned last time, the Keystone Policy Center is leading a consultant team who's beginning that work. That's going to include early engagement of stakeholders, as well as a in-depth research and literature review to see what's out on the landscape and look at gaps and opportunities and alignment. We're pleased this year that our Director's Innovation Fund is showing pretty good interest from staff across both the parks and wildlife sides of the agency. We got some unique projects already, and that application period is open through the end of the week. And then we hope to share the results of that with you in probably June. And then lastly, I want to thank Acting Director Dugan for coming up to our board meeting last week and speaking to our board and spending time with us. We really appreciate that, as well as a couple of our CPW staff that came up and supported. Our next board meeting will be in June. We'll be up in Crested Butte. And again, you're always welcome. I want to extend the invitation. And if anyone's interested in checking it out and seeing what we're up to, I'd be more than happy to share information with you afterwards. And then lastly, I did bring hard copies of our annual report, which we just released recently. And when you look at it, it's just great to see the work we all do highlighted in one small publication. And that's for all four of our funding purposes: local government, open space, and then of course the CPW quadrants, wildlife, and outdoor recreation. So with that, we'll wrap it up and see if there's any questions or comments.
Okay, always a lot of fun. Our two members of the GOCO board, I certainly always invite them. Commissioner Touchton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, first, I wanted to start by saying thank you for the Highline Canal. I grew up near the Highline Canal, and it has changed from an era where I think it was Denver Water used to chase kids away from the Highline Canal. Public access was forbidden, to now I think it's one of the biggest recreational amenities in the city, and improving it so it goes through all of the city is really worthwhile. And then I had a question for each of you, I think, but I might. So the first, I guess, is for Matt, since you're the rep for Denver. There's a thing on the ballot in Denver which I found dangerous for an organization like GOCO or us that spends a lot of money on conservation easements, and it's a proposal to extinguish a conservation easement on it was the Park Hill Golf Course, and which I think is a very dangerous thing. The proposal includes building low-income housing, so it's forcing people to choose between two things. They should have the ability to say yes to both, low-income housing and a park, not pick one. But I'm wondered if we've done any work on what I view as the danger of thinking we've done something permanent with a conservation easement and then having it undone. And so I just like some feedback really on that.
Yeah, I would say GOCO has not publicly expressed any, opinion on the ballot initiative. I know with Keep It Colorado, which is one of our big funding partners for the land trust community, they're doing their own legwork as far as educating the public and mayoral candidates and et cetera with the larger story that sometimes gets lost in the news media and whatnot, as far as having a legal opinion on that would probably be the best and most efficient route forward for actually making a true decision on the land. So I don't know if I'm answering your question other than, we're relying on our partners really to share that message, knowing that, land trusts are a huge constituent of our work, and want to make sure that the public is at least educated on what they're really voting on, and yeah, I don't know if
No,
that
I
really
just
helps.
really wanted to know that you were on it, and so
Yeah.
that was helpful.
We've talked with the city. The city, is one of our biggest partners, and, often we have annual get-togethers as far as what the city is planning. So in those sort of one-off conversations, we've definitely expressed that, we have to maintain equilibrium with both our municipal and land trust partners. And I think our preference obviously would be to have that legal opinion at the recommendation of our partners with Keep It Colorado. But we're kind of just staying out of it for the most part.
Okay. Well, then my other question, I think, is for Dan, but with all the funding GOCO has give to either supporting or expanding our state park network, I remember back a couple years ago, we had a process where people submitted applications for new state parks or ideas for new state parks, and then I never saw results of where those applications or ideas went. And so I just wanted an update on if that process resulted in any planning for future state parks.
Yeah, thanks for that question, Jay. I think that would be best answered by CPW staff, as that's a CPW program. Yeah, thanks for the question on that.
Okay, Commissioner Adams?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you so much for the update. I have a few questions. One, it was just very helpful to know that you're involved in the issues around city park golf course, and also just the reminder, right, around the conflict between housing and habitat, quite frankly. And I think it's important, again, to remember the reminders of how we got here. So, right, there was a lot of land, and so it's the marginalized that are now seeming to be plotting against conservation, and that's something that's just not accurate. So I'm excited to know that that relationship exists and that these conversations are happening, and it's conversations that we're going to have as well, right? I heard that, CPW may be considering building some housing opportunities for staff on our lands, right? That is the same as what we're doing here. And so again, I just want to honor that distinction. As far as the presentation that you provided, I did have some questions about just points of clarification. Can you unpack wildlife heritage for us?
Yeah, thank you for that question, Commissioner Adams. And I'd be happy to dig in a little deeper with you afterwards if you want on a break. But the Wildlife Heritage Programming includes the threatened and endangered species and native species conservation programming, as well as the aquatic species at risk programs. And I can provide a copy of the investment proposal if you want to read more detail on that.
Oh, no, that was, and again, it was actually more so for the public because they saw the slide, and I just wanted to make sure that they unpacked what that specific term meant, because I think people have a different understanding of that term and how we apply it in this context. So I thank you for that clarification. I also was just curious about the relationship between the Outdoor Equity Fund recipients and Generation Wild Coalition, and just your thinking on how services and programs differ or similar based on whether you're receiving funds from, the different entities, and just how you're kind of working with the braiding of that. I know you all are not unfamiliar with braiding a variety of different funding streams, but that's one question I have around that. I haven't had a chance to look at the annual report yet, so I will do that. But one thing I did have some curiosities around was just a longer term study of the outcomes of the work that Generation Wild has been doing. Specifically, I know we've getting a lot of information on like the number of, so a lot of output data, but I am particularly interested in how many of those youth that were participating are now in careers of conservation or recreation or habitat, right? You know, the youth corps and all these things, right, that we fund that say that they're going to have these long-term outcomes. Well, I think that there has been sufficient time to start to look at a longer-term study on some of the outcomes that can tell the story of why it's important to continue to invest and perhaps even increase investment around these types of programs. So that's another piece there. Then I had some questions around green gentrification. So I love seeing all of these projects that you are investing in, the ponds and the greenways, but what I often see is, as a result of that, is the displacement of those who lived in those communities when the water was dirty, when there wasn't any vegetation around, when there was no birds around, and all of the wildlife that comes with stronger habitat. And so I was just curious if GoCo is working with local businesses, community members, our Office of Economic, something, outdoor rec, right? I just feel like we make these siloed investments and not recognizing that there's implications for those investments. And so that was another thing. And again, I know I have a lot of questions and we have a lot on our agenda, but I think we don't spend a third of our time on conversations around this, so I'm fine with that. And then lastly, let me just make sure I can read my handwriting. I can't, so I think we're done. Those are my questions. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thanks for those questions, Commissioner Adams. I think I'll start with the last question you had and then hand it back to Matt, as a lot of the Generation Wild that's really driven through his side of the operations and our competitive quadrants. But as far as your concerns on green gentrification, I would say as part of our new I'm sorry, this monitor.
I know, the thing is
it's like a giant monitor. Community-driven collaboratives are what we're looking to fund, and that's where we're putting our priorities and our values-based grant-making philosophy. So a lot of the funding that we're investing in on the competitive side is based on that community-driven needs, wants, and projects that start with community. And then I'll hand it here to Matt, who can speak to the Generation Wild program.
Yeah, and I'll just add to your question too. We are pushing urban communities specifically, who we know have capacity and obviously a larger proportion of BIPOC folks, to push the narrative as far as what does traditional community planning look like, how to include marginalized voices in that work, and only really funding projects that kind of are going above and beyond, which maybe that's the wrong term nowadays, because that should be the standard. For places like Denver, I know for this specific project, they are even going as far as to look into anti-displacement services for residents in that area. I could not truly articulate maybe what that looks like, but at least that's on their radar for ensuring that what they're going to build, which is at the request of residents, like you said, then doesn't result in the removal of those folks from the places that they put the time and energy into soliciting the city to improve. As far as, let's see if I wrote down your questions accurately, but as far as the connection between Generation Wild and the Outdoor Equity Fund, I don't know if we've fully massaged what that relationship could look like. I know the Equity Fund is, I think, on their second funding cycle, third at this point. We do have 2 staff who kind of sit on that panel and reviewer pool. I would say we encourage a lot of our Generation Wild recipients, both at the Commerce City, the municipal level, but also those nonprofit partners, to be aware of this funding opportunity that's out there, as we know that GoCo funding can never be the sole and only partner in those programs. So I would say the relationship right now is really awareness building around the program. GoCo has committed to Generation Wild being a base program, which previously was more of a special initiative opportunity. So coalitions are able to better plan for the future now that they know funding for this program is going to continue into the future. So maybe that is then an opportunity now to how to tie something like or equity dollars towards continuing their work into the future. But I don't think we have an answer to it right now, other than, we're actively involved in those conversations in the development for the refinement of that program. And, Generation Wild is also in its, maybe third iteration. So how, during those conversations too, where something like the equity fund is now at the table that wasn't previously, I think those are things we have to think about in further developing that program. As far as paid youth and the longevity around that, tracking people, as I'm sure you're aware, is really, really challenging. So I don't personally know off the top of my head if there's any, data around that specifically. I know anecdotally, partners like the Northeast Metro Coalition have talked about certain young people that have gone through this sort of scaffolding approach of, just being maybe an elk participant and then being a ranger at their program and then getting a summer internship at the Arsenal and then, hopefully considering, those opportunities as a further career path. So we hear those maybe one-off anecdotal stories, which I think is worth capturing. Storytelling in our comms team is a huge component of our work. But yeah, I think we don't have, I guess, hard data on the outcome, like how many young people have transitioned into those roles specifically.
Thank you. Other questions for GOCO? Do you want to recognize, we have another GOCO board member in the room, and that is Brenda May. So hi, Brenda. Good to see you as well. I don't think we're missing anyone. Any other questions for our GOCO team, who I assume will hang out for the balance of the day and be around? Okay, great, awesome. Okay, we're almost on time. Why don't we go ahead and take a break until 10:30 sharp and reconvene at that time. And sort of snacks and stuff are out the back door here down the hall, and restrooms are also right out this door right here. Thanks. Okay, we have commissioners entering back into the room. For members of the public, we are, this is part of the March 2023 Colorado Parks and Wildlife Commission meeting. We are just after our break on the agenda on item number 11, which is his final regulations. So Hillary Hernandez will start with Chapter W3.
Good morning, Madam Chair and Commission. I'm Hillary Hernandez, the Regulations Manager for Colorado Parks and Wildlife. We're on agenda item 11 for Chapter W3, fur bearers and small game except migratory birds. This is step 2 of 2, found on the gray paper on pages 5 through 23. For this item, there are 3 changes. The first change is to update the season dates for this year. The second change modifies the Harvest Information Program to no longer require sports people only pursuing fur bearers to register with the HIP. There was some misunderstanding by the public on this item, so I just wanted to clarify it real quick. We still collect harvest information. The fur harvester information will continue to be collected through harvest surveys using the sample pool generated by the fur bearer harvest permit and the fur bearer license, which will provide us with improved harvest estimations over what we previously received through the HIP. So this is just closing that and taking out that redundancy. So also, as stated at the last meeting, coyote hunters will still need to register for the HIP before pursuing coyotes. The third change will create a white-tailed ptarmigan, greater sage grouse, and Columbian sharp-tailed grouse permit that would be required in addition to a small game license to take these species. After discussion with Justin, we still recommend the permit cost $5. And this is an action item, and I can take any questions at this time.
Commissioner Touchton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hillary, I just wanted to thank you for checking if we can sell anything for $5 without losing money on it. But I very much support getting that specific data on who is taking those. I guess they're all declining species, so yeah, we need to be careful there.
Okay, any other questions? This is an action item, so I will entertain a motion to accept changes to the season dates for small game, changes to the,
No, it's so moved.
I'm sorry, other questions? Are you just ready to motion? Okay, I'm just going to read, I'm sorry, I'm just going to read it for the benefit of the public. Okay, I don't see any other questions. So a motion to adopt the changes to the season dates for small game, changes to the Harvest Information Program, and the creation of a white-tailed ptarmigan, greater sage grouse, and Columbian sharp-tailed grouse permit as proposed by staff. Commissioner Phillips is motioning, and I think Commissioner Adams is, Commissioner Touchton is second. I think we'll do a voice vote on this. All in favor, please indicate by saying aye. Any opposed, same sign. Okay, Hillary will move on to item number 12.
Great, so we're on agenda item number 12 on the peach paper for Chapter W5, small game and migratory birds. This is looking at the proposed season dates for migratory birds for the upcoming season. In this packet, you will see that there are 2 proposed options for updating the season dates and bag limits. Option number 1, found on pages 2 through 9, covers the standard season date changes to update for the current calendar year. In addition to those changes, it also changes the dates for the northeast duck zone from last season to shorten the length of the split or closed portion of the season in December by a week, which is made possible by delaying the opening of the season in October by a week. The dates for the Northeast Youth Military Weekend have also been moved 1 week later than they were in the previous year. These recommendations are in compliance with the federal frameworks, and this is the division-supported option. Option number 2, found on pages 10 through 17, has all of the changes from option number 1. In addition to those changes, this option closes the Sora and Virginia rail seasons to hunting and closes the crow hunting season, except as authorized pursuant to statute 33-6-107, subsection 9. This option has been brought to the commission at the request of the commission during the January commission meeting. And this is an action item, and I can take any questions at this time.
Commissioner May.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I feel compelled to speak first because this has kind of been my thing for the last year. I'd probably mention that we have spoken about this for a year now. And it's only in the last 3 or 4 days that we've gotten a response and engagement from the public on it, which I don't really understand. it would have helped if we could have had some of this out in advance. Speaking on my part, I'm not anti-hunting. I never intended to ban the season, but I'm more engaged with trying to protect the species, to protect the resource, the habitat, and I feel that we don't have enough information, such as we don't have specific population for Colorado. We know about presence. We have the presence. We don't know about population. I have to refer to my portion of the state in regards to this. And in southeast Colorado, in the last few years, emergent wetlands and marshlands, which is the habitat for these species, has been degraded to the point that some of them are non-existent. What used to be a series of connected wetlands that might stretch for miles or hundreds of acres, today in those places might be 1-2 acre wetland that is ephemeral, maybe not even has the ability to have water on top. And these are disconnected, they're separated in the fact that these bird populations become isolated. And the issue I have with this, that as it is written and has been done in the past, is the fact that with the daily limit of 25 and a possession limit of 75, a group of hunters with dogs could go out there into some of these isolated wetlands and extirpate the birds from those wetlands. If it's at the end of the season, they're migrating, and that happens, those birds may never come back to those wetlands. So my advocacy is for a reduction in the daily bag limit to maybe 10 or 15. As I have spoken with rail hunters, it's more common, as I get the experience, that they might get 3 or 4 in a day. And I understand that 25 comes from the Migratory Bird Act, but I think that that is an aggregate of states and the information that is collected from those states. I would like to see Colorado do a more concise study of the population in Colorado and maybe adjust those numbers before it gets to the point that we have a downward spiral of these two species because of the habitat that is becoming degraded. And maybe all I'm asking for is to maybe reduce the daily bag limits to some point. Whatever that is up for discussion. But then we could at least know where we are on the protection of this resource. I have to mention in one of the emails, and I received a lot in the last few days, there was one comment made that they can't believe that CPW has time to consider the hunting of a few species of birds. And I have to say that's a sad commentary that this commission and this agency considers every species that we deal with important. It's not the fact that a few small insignificant marsh birds might not receive our attention, but I think they are just as important as some of the other things we're doing. And also I believe that it's a false narrative to say that when we're trying to protect habitat, species, and be stewards of that, that's framed as an anti-hunting thought. And that's basically what I wanted to start with. I'm not opposed to the hunting of these. I am opposed to what I consider the obscene 25 daily bag limit and 75 possession limit.
Thank you, Commissioner May. Commissioner Blecka, and then Commissioner Touchton. Sorry, it just depended on which way I looked first. Commissioner Blecka.
Okay, thank you. I would like to speak to this not based on my emotion to an animal, but I'm here to talk about process, and that we're a government agency, and since we are government, we operate under process. And regardless of what we bring forward as a commission, I just encourage us to remove emotion out of it and bring forward the process part of it. There is a process in place to get to a point where our desires are heard or honored, but starting at the end with a ban to something that's already being allowed, I feel is a poor process. And so I ask us moving forward that we start at the beginning and work through the process to have those discussions to get to the point where we want to be and not start with a ban. Because one of these species that we're talking about is unlimited. And so it does impact people's lives. Words do matter. And so I just want to ask us to go through established processes so we can have discussion to get to a different place. Thank you.
Commissioner Touchton, did you turn your light off, or are you still in the queue? Oh, I'm sorry. I'm going to go to Commissioner Touchton, and then I'll turn mine off, and yours.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, I was one of the commissioners who got us into this as well, so I feel I should, give my thoughts. And similar to Dallas, I wanted to be clear at the beginning that some people said this is a slippery slope, Touchton's chipping away at hunting. That's not my intention whatsoever. A lot of commenters cited the North American model of wildlife conservation, and I'm actually trying to defend that model of wildlife conservation to some extent, because one of its tenets is that wildlife should be killed for a legitimate purpose. And that purpose has historically been defined as collecting food, or in some cases, fur. And so one of my concerns here is with some of these species, there's nothing to collect. Rails are very small creatures. If you actually hit one, depending on what kind of shotgun you've used, there's going to be nothing left. But let me distinguish between rails and sora and crow, and I also mentioned prairie dogs. With those later species, no one even picks them up. They're just left in the field. I've seen prairie dog hunters who don't even get out of their truck. They just shoot out the window and then drive off when they're done. To me, that is not hunting. And so I understand that it can be done for agricultural control under different statutes, and I think we should let it be done. When we call it hunting, it happens on public land as opposed to just private land. But again, this is a biological concern. Let me explain in just two ways. With rail and sora, my biological concern, which I'd like us to look at, is they occur in the same habitat as an endangered species, the black rail, and they look pretty much the same. And when you're jump shooting out of a patch of cattails, you're not going to know. So I would like us to look at least closing those seasons where they co-occur with black rails to avoid black rails getting shot on accident. With crows and prairie dogs, my concern there that's biologically driven is that no one picks them up. They're just shot and left, and then they become a conduit for lead into raptors and scavengers. I don't have data on crows, but I've reviewed a number of studies that show dead prairie dogs left in the field by recreational shooters lead to increased lead levels in eagles and hawks, which actually follow the prairie dog shooters from colony to colony. And that work was done in Montana. So again, I'm not anti-hunting. I'm trying to distinguish hunting from something I view as not hunting. And shooting something and just letting it lay, in my mind, and the way I was raised, is not hunting. And we should figure out a different, let it become control or something like that. But again, I hear Commissioner Blecka, and we got to get the cart in front of the horse, and we need to spend our time looking at it. But from an investigation standpoint, I'd like to have data on where rail and sora co-occur with black rail, Virginia rail and black rail. And I think we should look at, if there's no actual harvest going on, that we get that out of our hunting regs and put it somewhere else. Those are just my thoughts on that.
Okay, thank you very much for that. Councilor Matter, did you have any kind of clarification on this item? Was it this item? Sorry, too many mics. I'll turn mine off, and then you're hot.
Hello. Yeah, I do have a couple comments, and this sort of originated in Colorado Springs, and I think this has involved obviously some public comments, some staff time, a memo from me, and I think I should have been more active in Colorado Springs. There was some commission discussion about I have an idea about this species, I have an idea about this species, I've got, personal thoughts, and I should have taken it as an opportunity to get more formal direction from the commission, if necessary, a vote to direct staff. I've looked into, Commissioner Tutchin just identified some research areas of interest, and I'm happy to work with that, work with the division to pursue those. But part of it is legal. I've looked into this target practice question or argument, and I don't think it's accurate as a matter of law. If a person takes a prairie dog on public land, do they need to take possession of the carcass? I think the answer is yes. If a person takes possession of a crow on public land, do they need to take possession of the carcass? Yes. Is that being enforced? I think is a different question than as a matter of law. Does that legal requirement exist? I think the legal requirement is there. And then with respect to being on private landowners are, as a matter of statute, entitled to remove prairie dogs, crows, and other species causing a nuisance and destruction of personal property and crops, etc. They're not allowed to pick up the carcass unless they have a small game license. So that is a statutory right to leave that animal where it was shot. You have the permission to pick it up if you buy a small game license. So I think what is I guess I have a question for Commissioner May also. You identified what I would call option C. Option A is sort of the status quo with changing the season dates but maintaining the current bag and possession limits. So that's kind of status quo option A. Option B in the materials is full closure of all 3 seasons, or crow and rail. Option C, I don't think touches on crow, and you would leave, under what you described, you would leave status quo treatment of crows. And you're sort of open to the discussion of 10 bag, 15 bag, and 45 possession. In my mind, there's a legal distinction between reducing bag and possession limits versus a full closure. A full closure requires a prior investigation to determine whether it's necessary. And that hasn't occurred here. So I think a closure is off the table, but the other discussions about altering the bag limits is an appropriate policy discussion for the commission to be having at this time.
Commissioner May, any follow-up on that? I'll get to others just sequentially.
Thank you, Jake. I think you framed it correctly in my mind. I do not want to ban the hunting of that. I want to keep it as a management issue, but I think it is extremely important that Colorado uses its own information rather than information from the Migratory Bird Act, which is aggregated against many states. And as I said, not to go too long, but many states that have a higher population of rails and soras have lower bag limits, which to me is counterintuitive. So my preference would be to lower the daily bag limit to 10, the possession limit to 25. And the reason I say those numbers is because the research that I can do and my personal experience is in these small wetland areas, what happens a lot with especially soras is there will be a group of 5 or 6 that are basically a family unit that have been in this small wetland, and they will not flush until they come to the end of that, to that cover. And the only reason they flush is they fly for one reason, that's to find a place to land that's safe. So they fly very ungainly, very short distance. And if this is the case, that there are only a few birds in the small wetland, they will be extirpated from that wetland. So that's why I agree with what you just said. I agree with an option C. I would be in favor of reducing the bag limits, and that number is arbitrary now. I say 10, a daily bag limit, and 25 as a possession limit. But those are my thoughts. Thank you.
Okay, Commissioner Reading, and then Commissioner Haskett,